You should write what you know. You should write what you know. You should write what you know. If you're a writer, you've probably been given that advice. You should write what you know. But what do you know and what's appropriate to write, and why is that good advice? Today we're going to talk about that. You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world. Welcome to the Julie Amante channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julie Amante. I'm a women's fiction author and here to give you some writing tips and writing advice to help you write better. So today we want to talk about this commonly given advice of write what you know. And what is it that people mean when they say that? I heard an interview recently where a lady said she was a vegan, but that she no longer identified herself as a vegan. And the reason she didn't do that anymore is because she is so much more than what she eats, and she doesn't want to be boxed in by that label. And I really, really love that, because one of the things that I've always hated is labeling people, right? Putting labels on people and saying, this is what you are. And the reason that I dislike that is because I agree with what this woman said, right? Is that once you label somebody, what that does is it puts people into a little box, and it makes it easy to identify, okay, you are this, you are that. And it's untrue, right? So we are a combination of everything that we are. So we're not just vegans, we're not just moms, we're not just whatever, right? Whatever you, all the different parts of what makes you you. You are your culture, you are your nationality, you are your age, you are your sex, you are all of these things together. Sometimes we identify more with one thing than the other, and that's that's natural. Sometimes there are some times when I identify myself as a mom, and I make my decisions and my values and all of that with that identity. There are other times where I identify myself as an author, as a writer, and I make my choices based on that. So we're not just one thing, and it's always bugged me. It bugged me back when I was in junior high school and high school, where you were labeled, of course, during that age. That's what happens, is a lot of kids like to group themselves, but and so if you were the smart kid, you were with the group with the smart kids, and if you were the sporty jock guys and girls, and that's where you were. And it always seemed really, really silly to me. Like, why can't I be both? Like, why can't I be smart but also hang out with other people? And I've never fit into like one little box. At least I didn't want to. I remember actually asking my dad once when I had to fill out a form for school, and and you're labeled by your ethnicity, and he just kind of checked one off for Hispanic, and probably. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so he explained it to me, and it's like, well, why do I have to fill that out? And he just kind of brushed me off. He's like, everything's about money. And I didn't really understand what that was, but kind of now I do. But it was interesting, right, to me, that you would be boxed and labeled literally into a little box. As I got older and as I became a writer and I started writing Latino fiction, again, you're boxed in, right? This is what you should write. If you start writing that, then that's where you end up writing. But I wrote an entire book, right? Becoming Latina in 10 Easy Steps, about how you're more than one thing. Being Latina doesn't identify you, because it depends on a lot of things, right? There's not one thing where you can say, oh, okay, now that I know she's Latina, now I know everything about her. I know what her beliefs are. I know what she likes to do. I know what she likes to eat. I know how many kids she's going to have. I know, crazy, right? Crazy. And so I've never liked that. So one of the worst pieces of advice, I think, that we give writers is write what you know. And I'll explain why I feel that way. Okay, first of all, let me say that advice is given to be helpful. It's not, it's not intended to box you in. So for example, let's say that you are, in your regular life, you're a chef or you're a police officer or you're a teacher, right? So when that advice is given, it's like, okay, write what you know. If you're a police officer, what do you know? Then maybe you're going to write a story about where the main character is a police officer. It just makes sense, makes it easier for you as a writer to not have to go out and do a bunch of research, because you're already familiar with the job and the little things that go with being, police officer, teacher, chef. It's easier for you because you don't have to go and interview somebody and say, well, let's see, what do police officers normally do when they're sitting in a police car waiting for something, right? You already know that. You're familiar with it because you lived it. So the intention of that advice is to say, okay, you're a new author. You are just starting out, and it's easier to write about things that you're familiar with and that you don't have to do a lot of research. So it's intended to help you. But again, what ends up happening is that it boxes you in. What if you don't want to write a main character who is a police officer and write, a crime novel or whatever? What if you want to write something else? What if you want to write fantasy? What if you want to write a romance with no police officers? Then you should be able to do that, right? And you can do that. So you don't have to write what you know. You can write something else. And here's the problem, right, with write what you know, is that knowledge comes from a lot of different sources. We assume that the only way that we can know about whatever, writing something different than what we're familiar with, is by actually living it, right? So if I am not a police officer, don't know anything about that, but if I wanted to write a main character who's a police officer, then do I have to have lived it? Should that have been my job before I could actually write about it? And no, the answer is no, you don't have to, right? Because that's not the only way that you gain knowledge and information. It's a little bit more work, probably, definitely for me to go out and write about this character that I have no idea, right? What this character does. I mean, I just spent the last couple of years writing about a character who is a medical student and becomes a resident and is doing all of these things. And I'm not a doctor. I don't know any about it, but I did have to spend more time researching, right, and learning about this so that I can write somewhat intelligently believable for my reader about this topic and about this woman's profession. Also, the nice thing about fiction is the profession is just one part of it, right? Unless it's the main thing. If you have a police officer who's the whole story is that his job and what he's doing, well, then you really do need to do a lot more research, right? If you don't know the ins and outs of that profession. But most of the time, knowledge comes from personally living it, and it also comes from that research, from reading about it, from interviewing people, from talking to people. So once I do that, right? Once I do that research and spend that time to learn about whatever it is I'm writing about, well, then I am writing what I know, right? Because now I know about it. So I'm not just writing something I have no knowledge of. I don't have personal experience, but I have knowledge about it. And now I can write about it because now I do know about it, right? So maybe what the advice should be is not write what you know. It should be know what you're writing about, right? So if you haven't lived through it, if you don't have the personal experience, then it should be find out and learn about it. Rather than trying to tell writers that, you should only write, because it is confusing. When it was first told to me, that's what I thought, well, okay, but I don't really know very much. I haven't lived very much. Back when I was 20 years old, what did I know, right, about anything other than just being a student and being a student through elementary school all the way through high school or college at that point. So I didn't know a lot of things, but I did know, and I did know that I could find out and learn things. So I think if we kind of turn that around a little bit and tell writers that it's okay to write about anything, just be well informed on what you're going to write about, because what your goal is to sound believable, to sound like you actually know what you're writing about. So, otherwise, of course, the reader is going to figure it out and say, well, this isn't the way it works. This isn't what this town looks like. This isn't what this profession is like. So if you're writing about something that you're unfamiliar with, then what you want to do is become familiar with it. Your job as a writer is to transport the reader into that character's world and to make it believable. So the more time you spend actually doing the research and finding out what it's like to be this character, to be the character who is a police officer, who is the character, to be like to live that character's life, to know what that character would feel like, to kind of inhabit that character's world. And that is your job. It's not so much to write what you know already, what you've lived, but putting yourself into that character's body and saying, okay, now that I am this character, now that I am this medical student, what are some of the things that I am going to feel and experience? What are my fears? Am I afraid of hurting a patient? Am I afraid of making a mistake? Am I confident? It has the things that I've learned in the classroom actually transferring into my character was in the ER. Was it transferring into ER? It was all that knowledge coming back to her now that she's working. And so I had to kind of understand, right, and there's different things, right? So some medical students are very nervous, or they're thinking, okay, well, I don't know if I can actually do what I was told. And some are very confident. They're like, yeah, I remember exactly what I learned in the classroom, or at least they want to appear more confident, right? And they have their attending physician with them, giving them instructions. They want to appear like they know what they're doing. So I added a lot of that into my character because, in some parts, when she left the hospital, she would feel that, oh my gosh, I have these people's lives in my hands and I'm a little afraid. But when she's in there, when she's actually working with patients, all that book knowledge comes back to her, and she's able to be the doctor that she's going to be someday, right? So put that into practice. How do I know that? Again, I'm not a doctor. I had to go and I had to inhabit this character and say, okay, well, let's learn and see what I find out about. And I watched videos of day in the lives of medical students, and I read what can possibly go wrong, what could go right. So all of that is your job as the writer, right? Is to write what you know and find out what you need to know in order to write what you know, right? Not what you've experienced, which is what a lot of people think, but write what you've learned and what you've researched, and so that you can deliver that into a believable form to the reader. Okay, so I hope that this short video has helped you kind of rethink that advice, that typical advice of write what you know, and that you go out there now and make sure that you are writing what you know, what you've experienced, what you've learned, and that you're able to transfer that to your reader. If this video has been helpful, please hit the like button, share the video with other people, and subscribe to the channel so that you know when I post a new video. It's usually Fridays, but occasionally I will post a video midweek as well. All right, so I will see you next week on Friday.